By sunrise, Ethan Caldwell would learn that the woman he left shivering in the rain was the only reason his billion-dollar empire still existed. The storm hit Manhattan like a warning. Rain hammered the black awning of the Grand Meridian Hotel, spilled over the marble steps, and turned Fifth Avenue into a river of yellow headlights and blurred reflections. Inside, behind walls of glass and gold, the Caldwell Foundation Gala was still glowing with champagne flutes, violin music, and the kind of laughter that belonged to people who had never checked a bank account before buying dinner. But outside, Olivia Bennet stood alone in a white evening gown that clung heavily to her knees, her hair loosened by the rain, her makeup softened at the edges, her breath shaking in the cold 40-degree air. In her right hand, she held a small silver USB drive. In her left, she held the engagement ring Ethan Caldwell had just taken from her finger. Not gently, not cruelly, worse than that, final. Ethan stood 3 steps below her beside his black Rolls-Royce, tall and perfect in his midnight tuxedo, his face lit by the flash of cameras still waiting beyond the barricades. To the world, he was everything a man was supposed to be. 34 years old, founder of Caldwell Global, young billionaire, the son of a dead legend, the man who could move markets with one phone call and silence a room by walking into it. But to Olivia, in that moment, he looked like a stranger wearing the face of the man she had almost trusted. "Give it to me," she said, lifting the USB just enough for him to see it. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the rain. "Everything you need is on this." Ethan looked at the little silver drive as if it were a weapon. Behind him, Victoria Hayes stepped under the edge of the awning, dry beneath a hotel umbrella, her red dress untouched by the storm. She said nothing at first. She did not have to. Her work had already been done inside the ballroom, when the giant screen behind the charity podium had suddenly filled with emails, wire transfer records, and confidential files that seemed to show Olivia leaking Caldwell Global data to a rival firm. The guests had gasped. The board members had turned cold. Reporters had lifted their phones. And Ethan, standing beside Olivia in front of 500 people, had looked at her like the world had finally proven every fear he had ever carried. "Ethan," Olivia said again, forcing herself not to look at Victoria. "Please, I know what they showed you. I know how it looks. But Grant Keller has been moving money through shell accounts for months. I found the pattern tonight. I tried to warn you before the gala started. This drive has the audit trail, the server logs, the payment signatures. If you just open it, you will see." His jaw tightened. Rain gathered on his black hair, slid along his cheek, and disappeared beneath his collar. For a second, something almost human passed through his eyes. Pain, doubt, maybe the memory of her laughing in his kitchen 2 nights earlier, barefoot on the marble floor while she corrected his burned coffee and told him billionaires should not be allowed near espresso machines. Maybe the memory of the night the penthouse lost power and he had wrapped his coat around her shoulders in the private elevator. Both of them trapped between floors, both of them suddenly less guarded in the dark. But then Victoria spoke softly. "Ethan, the board is waiting. Every minute you stand here makes this worse." Olivia felt the sentence land exactly where Victoria intended. Not in Ethan's ears, in his pride. Ethan took one slow breath. "How long?" he asked. Olivia blinked. "How long what? How long have you been planning this?" The rain seemed to stop inside her chest. Around them, tires hissed against wet pavement. A camera flashed from across the street. The doorman looked away as if embarrassment were contagious. Olivia stared at the man who had asked her to pretend to love him for 6 months, the man who had written rules into a contract because he was terrified of being used, the man who had begun to look at her like the contract was becoming the smallest thing between them. "You think I did this?" she whispered. Ethan did not answer quickly enough. That was the answer. Her fingers closed tighter around the USB until the metal edge pressed into her palm. "After everything you saw," she said, "after every question I asked about your company, after every warning I tried to give you, you still think I came here to steal from you." "I think," Ethan said, each word controlled with brutal care, "that I ignored every sign because I wanted to believe you were different." Olivia flinched, but she did not cry. Not yet. She had learned long ago that rich rooms loved poor tears. They made people feel generous without making them feel guilty. She lifted her chin, rain sliding down her face like glass. "No, you wanted me to be simple, grateful, pretty enough for photographs and quiet enough for boardrooms. The moment I became complicated, you chose the easier story." Ethan looked toward the hotel doors, where 2 board members watched from inside, their faces pale with panic. His empire was bleeding behind those doors. His name, his father's legacy, his entire world. And somehow, with Olivia standing in front of him, soaked and shaking, he still chose the world that had always obeyed him. "The car is leaving," he said. "You should call someone." For one heartbeat, Olivia did not understand. Then the chauffeur opened the rear door. Warm amber light spilled from inside the Rolls-Royce, touching Ethan's polished shoes, stopping just short of her wet hem. She gave a small, stunned laugh, the kind that came from a place too broken for tears. "Call someone?" she repeated. "You are leaving me here?" Ethan looked at the ring in her hand. "The engagement is over." Victoria lowered her eyes, hiding the smallest smile. Olivia saw it. Ethan did not. He had never seen women like Victoria clearly because they came dressed in his own language. Wealth, loyalty, strategy, family name. Olivia came with a scholarship education, a dead father's debts, and a mind sharp enough to frighten people who underestimated her. She stepped closer and held out the USB one last time. "Take it. Hate me tomorrow if you still want to, but take it tonight." Ethan's hand moved slightly, then stopped. The hesitation lasted less than a second, but Olivia would remember it forever. He almost trusted her. Almost. Then he turned away and got into the car. The door shut with a soft, expensive click. The Rolls-Royce pulled into traffic, its red taillights fading into the rain until they looked like 2 dying embers. Olivia stood on the hotel steps, alone beneath the storm, the ring cold in her hand, the USB still untouched. For the first time all night, her eyes filled. But before a single tear could fall, her phone vibrated inside her small silver clutch. She opened it with numb fingers. One security alert glowed on the screen from Caldwell Global's internal system, tied to the temporary access Ethan had forgotten he had given her weeks ago. Unauthorized transfer scheduled. Amount: $940 million. Execution time. 2 a.m. Olivia looked down the avenue where Ethan's car had vanished. She could let him lose everything. After what he had done, no one would blame her. Instead, she closed her fist around the USB, stepped off the marble curb into the rain, and whispered, "You will know the truth by morning." 6 months before Olivia Bennett stood alone in that storm, she sat across from Ethan Caldwell in a glass-walled law office 72 floors above Midtown Manhattan, watching a man offer her a future that sounded less like a dream and more like a business transaction. The conference room was silent except for the soft hum of the air conditioner and the faint sweep of traffic far below. Tiny yellow cabs moving like sparks between steel towers. Ethan sat at the head of the polished table in a charcoal suit, one hand resting beside a black leather folder, his posture calm enough to make the room feel colder. He did not smile when she entered. He did not pretend this was romantic. He only stood, buttoned his jacket and said, "Miss Bennett, thank you for coming." Olivia had worn her best navy dress, the one she saved for interviews and funerals, because lately her life had contained too much of both. Her father had been gone for 11 months. His hospital bills had outlived him. The small house in Queens where her mother still kept his coffee mug beside the sink was 30 days from foreclosure. Olivia had applied for 14 jobs, sold her car, canceled her health insurance, and learned exactly how long a person could stand in a grocery aisle calculating soup cans before pride began to feel expensive. Still, she looked at Ethan Caldwell and refused to lower her eyes. "Your attorney said this was about a consulting opportunity," she said. Ethan glanced toward the older man seated beside him, then back to her. "In part." The attorney slid the folder across the table. Olivia opened it. The first page stopped her breath. Engagement Representation Agreement. For a moment, she thought she had misread it. Then she read the next line. 6-month public engagement. Compensation upon completion. Non-disclosure required. No expectation of emotional commitment. Olivia looked up slowly. "You want to hire a fiancé?" Ethan's expression did not change. "I need stability in the eyes of the board. My father's will gives me full voting control only if I demonstrate what he called domestic continuity before the next annual review." His wording, not mine. "Domestic continuity?" Olivia repeated, almost laughing because the phrase was so polished it barely sounded human. "Meaning a wife. A credible fiancé will be enough until the review passes. And I am credible? You are educated, composed, and currently invisible to the press. That is useful." The honesty should have offended her. Strangely, it steadied her. Men like Ethan rarely lied when they believed money gave them permission to be blunt. She looked back at the contract, turning pages with fingers that stayed calm only because she forced them to. 6 months. Public appearances. Charity events. Family dinners. Shared residence when necessary. No personal disclosure beyond agreed biography. No interference in Caldwell Global operations. That line caught her eye. No interference. She tapped it once. "You are asking me to stand beside the chief executive officer of a global company and pretend to be part of his life. But I am not allowed to comment if I see something wrong?" Ethan leaned back slightly. "You would not be in a position to see something wrong." Olivia met his eyes. "That was not my question." For the first time, a flicker of interest crossed his face. The attorney cleared his throat as if to regain control, but Ethan lifted one finger and the room went quiet again. Olivia picked up the silver pen beside the document and crossed out 3 lines with clean, decisive strokes. The attorney sat forward. "Miss Bennett, those are standard clauses." "Not anymore," she said. She wrote in the margin, then turned the page toward Ethan. "If I am expected to protect your public image, I reserve the right to warn you privately about reputational or financial risks I directly observe. I will not be treated as decorative furniture. I will not lie about my mother, my education, or where I grew up. And if anyone on your team uses my background to humiliate me publicly, the agreement terminates with full payment." The attorney stared at her as if she had reached across the table and taken his watch. Ethan looked at the edits. Slowly, one corner of his mouth lifted. Not quite a smile, more like surprise trying not to show itself. "You read contracts carefully. I learned from watching people ruin my father with fine print." The room softened around the edges for one dangerous second. Ethan heard the pain beneath the sentence, but Olivia closed the door before he could look through it. He studied her again, this time not as a candidate, not as a solution, but as a woman who had walked into his tower needing money and still found the nerve to negotiate with a billionaire. "What did your father do?" he asked. "Accounting supervisor for a logistics company in New Jersey. And you?" "Risk analysis. Internal compliance. Until my last company downsized half the department and kept the half with relatives on the board." Ethan's gaze sharpened. "So you understand financial controls. Enough to know when powerful men call a problem complicated because calling it theft would embarrass their friends." The attorney looked horrified. Ethan almost laughed. Almost. It had been years since someone spoke to him without polishing every word first. Around him, people adjusted themselves to his wealth, softened their voices, measured their opinions, laughed 1 second too late. Olivia Bennett did none of that. Her dress was modest. Her shoes were worn at the heel. There was a tiny ink stain on her thumb, probably from filling out forms by hand. But her eyes were steady, and Ethan found himself wondering how many rooms had underestimated her before this one. "Your mother's house," he said. "That is why you are here." Olivia's spine stiffened. "I am here because your office contacted me." "That is not an answer." "Then ask a kinder question." The words landed hard. Not loud. Not dramatic. Just true. Ethan looked away first, toward the city beyond the windows, where his name sat on buildings he owned and billboards he never noticed. When he turned back, his voice was quieter. "I apologize." Olivia had not expected that. Men like him usually treated apologies as losses. She nodded once, accepting it without rewarding him for basic decency. Ethan took the contract, read her handwritten edits, and signed beneath them. Then he slid it back to her. 6 months. We appear together. We follow the story. We do not confuse performance with reality. Olivia looked at the signature, bold and black against the paper. 6 months could save her mother's home. 6 months could bury the debt collectors. 6 months could give her room to breathe. But there was something dangerous in the way Ethan said reality. as though he believed he could command it. She signed her name, Olivia Bennett. The letters looked smaller beside his, but they did not shake. Ethan opened a small velvet box and placed a diamond ring on the table between them. It caught the afternoon light and scattered it across the ceiling like fragments of a promise nobody meant to keep. He did not reach for her hand. She respected him for that. A little. For public appearances, he said. Olivia picked up the ring and slipped it onto her own finger. It fit perfectly, which bothered her more than it should have. Ethan noticed. My assistant asked for your size. Of course she did. She closed the folder and stood. When does the performance begin? Ethan's phone lit up before he could answer. A message flashed across the screen from Grant Keller, his chief financial officer. Quarterly numbers adjusted. Board pressure contained. Ethan turned the phone face down, but Olivia had already seen the words. Adjusted. Contained. Too harmless. Words to anyone else. To her, they left a faint chill along the back of her neck. Ethan walked her to the elevator. Polite, controlled, unreachable again. As the doors opened, he said, "One more thing, Miss Bennett. In my world, trust is expensive." Olivia stepped inside and looked back at him, the diamond cold on her finger. Then you should be careful where you spend it. The elevator doors slid shut between them, and as Olivia descended toward the street, she could not explain why the message on Ethan's phone stayed with her longer than the ring. The first night Olivia moved into Ethan Caldwell's penthouse, she realized wealth did not make a home warmer. It only made the silence more expensive. The elevator opened directly into a marble foyer high above Central Park, where floor-to-ceiling windows held the city like a glittering photograph and every surface looked too polished to touch. A housekeeper had already placed Olivia's 2 suitcases near the guest suite, side by side beneath a chandelier that cost more than her mother's house. Ethan stood by the windows with his phone in one hand, speaking in the calm, clipped voice he used for people who were paid to listen. "No. Tell Grant I want the revised numbers before Monday. And make sure the board packet is clean." Olivia paused near the doorway. That word again. Clean. It slipped through the room like a thread pulled from the wrong seam. Ethan ended the call and turned as if only then remembering she existed. "Your room is down the hall. My staff has your schedule for the week. Breakfast interview tomorrow. Museum benefit Thursday. Dinner with 2 board members Friday." Olivia looked around the enormous space, at the stone fireplace with no fire, the white orchids with no scent, the long dining table set for people who were never there. Do people live here? Or do they just walk through quietly and try not to leave fingerprints? Ethan studied her for half a second, then looked toward the hallway. "You will get used to it. That is what people say about bad weather and uncomfortable shoes." Something almost moved at the corner of his mouth, but he buried it before it became a smile. "Good night, Miss Bennett." "Good night, Mr. Caldwell." The names reminded both of them of the contract. That was safer. Over the next 2 weeks, Olivia learned that pretending to be loved by a billionaire required more discipline than any job she had ever had. She learned which hand to offer photographers so the diamond caught the light. She learned not to flinch when strangers congratulated her, as if she had won a prize instead of signed an agreement. She learned that people in Ethan's world could insult you without changing their tone. At a private dinner on the Upper East Side, a woman in pearls looked at Olivia's navy dress and said, "How refreshing. You did not overdo it." Another asked where she summered, as if not having a summer address were a character flaw. When Olivia answered, "Mostly Queens," the woman blinked, smiled, and said, "How grounded." Ethan heard it. Olivia watched him hear it. He lifted his glass but said nothing. That silence followed her home more sharply than any insult. Later, in the penthouse kitchen, she found him pouring water beside the sink. His tie loosened, his face unreadable. "You could have corrected her," Olivia said. "Corrected who?" "The woman who acted like queens was a contagious condition." Ethan set the glass down. "Margaret Whitmore is on the foundation committee. Starting an argument with her over dinner would not help either of us." Olivia nodded slowly. "So your strategy is to let people mistake manners for permission." His eyes narrowed. "You handled yourself well. That is not the same as being defended." The words hung between them, small but bright. Ethan looked away first. "I did not hire you to fight my social battles." Olivia felt the sting, but she kept her voice steady. "No, you hired me to stand close enough to make you look trustworthy, but far enough that you do not have to trust me." For a moment, the hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the room. Then Ethan said, quieter, "Be careful, Olivia. My world punishes people who speak too honestly." She gave him a tired smile. "So does mine. Yours just serves better wine." She walked away before he could answer, and Ethan stayed in the kitchen long after the lights dimmed, staring at the empty hallway as if she had left behind a question he did not know how to solve. The next public event was a Caldwell Global reception at a private club near Bryant Park. The room was all dark wood, old money, low laughter, and men who spoke about layoffs with the same tone they used to discuss golf. Olivia wore a cream dress Ethan's assistant had selected, though she kept her own small silver earrings because they had belonged to her mother. Victoria Hayes arrived halfway through the evening, elegant in emerald silk, with a smile that looked warm until it reached her eyes. She kissed Ethan on the cheek, then turned to Olivia as if inspecting a painting chosen by someone else. "So this is the famous Olivia Bennett. I did not know I was famous. In certain circles, being unexpected is enough." Ethan's hand rested lightly at Olivia's back for the photographers. The touch was part of the performance, but it steadied her anyway, which annoyed her more than the insult. Victoria noticed. Of course she noticed. "Ethan has always had a generous streak," Victoria said. "He likes rescuing things, old buildings, failing divisions, people." Olivia smiled, soft and sharp. "Then I hope he also likes listening when those people have something useful to say." Victoria's expression did not change, but her eyes cooled. "How admirable. Confidence looks different on everyone." Later that night, while Ethan was pulled into a conversation with board members, Olivia stepped away to find a quiet corner. She ended up near a side table stacked with briefing folders for the next morning's executive session. She did not mean to pry. At least, that was what she told herself before she saw the Caldwell Global logo, Grant Keller's initials, and a spreadsheet page half exposed beneath a leather portfolio. One column was labeled Restructuring Reserve. Another was labeled Vendor Reconciliation. But the numbers did not behave like reserves. They repeated in strange intervals, just below the threshold that would trigger automatic review. $98,000. $97,500. $99,200. Different vendors. Similar amounts. Same approval chain. Olivia felt the room fade around her. She had seen patterns like this before, back when her father came home every night pale and exhausted, saying the books did not make sense, saying someone above him was moving shadows through clean accounts. Then he was accused before he could prove it. Then his name was buried under legal fees and shame. Olivia reached for the page, but a hand closed the folder before she could touch it. Grant Keller stood on the other side of the table, smiling politely. Looking for something, Miss Bennett? His voice was smooth, friendly, empty. Olivia lifted her eyes to his. Just water. Grant picked up the folder and tucked it beneath his arm. Careful. Executive materials can be terribly boring if you are not used to them. I am sure I would survive. Of course, he said. Ethan does admire brave women. He walked away before she could respond. Across the room, Victoria watched over the rim of her champagne glass. Ethan was still speaking with the board, unaware that Olivia's heart had begun to pound for a reason that had nothing to do with romance. That night, back at the penthouse, Olivia stood alone in the guest bathroom, the diamond ring glittering under the harsh white light as rain tapped softly against the window. She opened her laptop, searched the vendor names she remembered, and found almost nothing. No websites, no staff listings, no addresses beyond rented office suites in Delaware and Nevada. Then one name appeared twice under two different companies, buried in public filings, attached to a signature she had seen on Grant's folder. Olivia sat very still. The contract said she was not supposed to interfere in Caldwell Global operations. But the contract had not said what to do when the empire she was hired to protect was already being hollowed out from the inside. For 3 days, Olivia carried the secret like a match hidden in her palm, small enough to conceal, hot enough to burn through everything. She did not tell Ethan right away, not because she wanted to keep something from him, but because men like Ethan Caldwell did not trust warnings without proof, and women like Olivia Bennett were rarely believed when all they had was instinct. So she watched. She listened. She smiled beside him at breakfasts where reporters asked about wedding flowers, at charity luncheons where strangers praised her ring before asking her name, at board dinners where Grant Keller spoke in calm numbers and Victoria Hayes looked at Olivia like a stain someone had not yet noticed on white silk. Every night, after Ethan disappeared into calls behind the glass doors of his study, Olivia sat cross-legged on the guest bed with her laptop open, copying public filings, comparing vendor names, building a pattern from scraps no one important had bothered to hide because no one important expected her to look. By Friday evening, a storm rolled over Manhattan, thick and metallic, pressing low against the skyline. The penthouse lights flickered once during dinner. Ethan looked up from his tablet. Olivia looked up from the bowl of soup neither of them had touched. That sounded expensive, she said. The building has backup generators, Ethan replied. Of course it does. I forgot rich people even have emergency lighting with better manners. This time he actually smiled. It was brief, almost unwilling, but it changed his face enough to make Olivia look away. Something had shifted between them since the reception. Not trust, not yet, but attention. Ethan had begun noticing when she went quiet. Olivia had begun noticing when he looked tired. They were still performing in public, but in private, the silences had become less sharp. After dinner, Ethan's assistant called to say a car was waiting downstairs for a late meeting with 2 foundation donors. Ethan frowned at the rain striking the windows. You do not have to come. It is mostly theater. Olivia closed her laptop before he could see the spreadsheet on the screen. I thought theater was my official job. Your official job is not to be bored by elderly philanthropists arguing over naming rights. I have survived worse. I once attended a 3-hour community board meeting about parking meters. He picked up his coat. Then you are overqualified. They entered the private elevator together, both reflected in the mirrored doors. Ethan in a dark overcoat, controlled and immaculate. Olivia in a simple black dress, the diamond on her finger catching the elevator light like a lie dressed as a promise. The elevator began its smooth descent. Then, somewhere around the 48th floor, the lights snapped off. The car jolted once and stopped. Olivia's breath caught before she could hide it. Darkness folded around them, broken only by a thin red emergency glow above the panel. The storm outside rumbled through the building like distant drums. Ethan pressed the call button. Nothing. He pressed again. The speaker crackled, then died. Backup generators? Olivia said, trying to sound calm. They usually engage in seconds. Usually is doing a lot of work in that sentence. Ethan took out his phone. No signal. Olivia checked hers. 1 weak bar, then none. For a moment, neither of them moved. The elevator felt smaller with every breath. The polished walls suddenly too close. The air too still. Olivia wrapped her arms around herself. Not from cold but from the old panic of being trapped somewhere with no control. Ethan noticed. Are you all right? I am fine. That was not an answer. She gave a short laugh, but it came out thin. I dislike elevators that make dramatic choices. Ethan removed his overcoat and placed it around her shoulders without asking. The warmth startled her. It smelled faintly of cedar, rain, and the kind of soap hotels used when they wanted towels to feel like status. Olivia looked down at the coat, then back at him. This is not in the contract. Neither is freezing. The sentence was so simple, so unexpectedly human, that it softened something she had been holding too tightly. She pulled the coat closer. Thank you. Ethan leaned against the opposite wall, the red light cutting shadows across his face. Without the city beneath him, without assistants and board members and doors opening before he touched them, he looked less like a billionaire and more like a man who had spent too many years standing guard over ruins no one else could see. You were right the other night, he said. Olivia blinked. That narrows it down. I try to be right often. About Margaret Whitmore. About me not defending you. The elevator hummed faintly, then fell silent again. Olivia studied him carefully, as if sudden apologies might have hidden clauses. Why did you not? Ethan looked at the floor. Because I was raised to believe every room has a price. You choose what matters most. Then you pay with whatever silence is required. That is a lonely way to live. It is an efficient one. Those are not the same. He did not answer at first. When he finally spoke, his voice had lost its boardroom polish. My mother used to say that. Olivia turned slightly toward him. She had heard pieces of the Caldwell family story from magazines and society whispers. Ethan's mother, Grace, had been a schoolteacher from Ohio who married into one of America's richest families and was punished for it until the day she died. They called her a gold digger, Ethan said. At dinners, in hallways, sometimes in front of me, as if I was too young to understand. My father loved her, but he did not always defend her. He thought time would prove them wrong. His jaw tightened. Time did nothing. She just got quieter. Olivia felt the words enter her gently, then painfully. She thought of her own father at the kitchen table in Queens, surrounded by unpaid legal letters, saying the truth would come out if he just kept cooperating. It never had. The truth did not come out for people who could not afford to drag it into the light. My father was accused of stealing from his company, she said. Ethan looked up. She had not meant to tell him. Not here. Not in the dark. But the elevator had stripped the performance from the air, and his coat was warm around her shoulders, and for once he was listening as if listening cost him something. He found irregular payments, Olivia continued. He reported them to his supervisor. 2 weeks later, the records changed. His login was on the approvals. He lost his job, his reputation, and most of his savings trying to fight it. He died before anyone admitted he was right. Ethan's expression changed, not with pity, which she would have hated, but with recognition. That is why you changed the contract. That is why I read everything before I sign. The elevator lights flickered weakly, then died again. Ethan took one step closer, not enough to crowd her, only enough that his voice lowered. Olivia, if you ever saw something like that around me, would you tell me? Her pulse moved hard in her throat. This was the opening she had needed. This was the moment. She could tell him about Grant's folders, the shell vendors, the repeated amounts, the signature buried in public filings. She could hand him the first thread and hope he cared enough to pull. Yes, she said softly. But you would have to decide whether you wanted the truth or the comfort of trusting the wrong people. Ethan held her gaze. Try me. Before Olivia could answer, the elevator lurched. The lights burst back on, and her phone came alive with a string of delayed notifications. One message sat at the top from an unknown number. Stop digging into Caldwell vendors, Miss Bennett. Some doors close for a reason. Olivia's face went still. Ethan saw the change immediately. What is it? She turned the screen face down against her palm, but the warmth of his coat suddenly felt heavier, because somewhere inside his perfect empire, someone already knew she was looking. By the following morning, Olivia understood two things with perfect clarity. Someone inside Caldwell Global knew she was looking, and Ethan Caldwell was not ready to believe how close the danger stood to him. She tried to tell him twice. The first time was in the penthouse kitchen at 6:15 a.m., while the sky over Manhattan was still gray, and the coffee machine hissed like a warning. Ethan walked in with his sleeves rolled to his forearms, already reading messages on his phone, already halfway inside a crisis she could not see. Olivia stood at the island with her laptop open, vendor names lined across the screen, her heart beating too quickly. Ethan, I need 10 minutes before your first call. He looked up. Is this about last night? It is about Grant Keller. His expression changed immediately, not with anger, but with the guarded patience of a man hearing something inconvenient. Grant has been with my family for 12 years. That does not make him honest. No, but it means accusations need more than suspicion. She turned the laptop toward him. I have more than suspicion. I found repeated payments just below review thresholds, shell vendors with shared registration addresses, and one approval signature tied to multiple entities. Someone warned me to stop digging. That finally caught him. Someone contacted you? Yes. Why did you not show me last night? Because the elevator doors opened. Because your world came rushing back. Because I saw your face and realized you still trust your walls more than the person trapped inside them with you. She did not say any of that. Instead, she reached for her phone. Before she could unlock it, Ethan's own phone rang. He looked at the screen, and the room closed around them. It is Victoria, he said. The Foundation Gala Committee. Olivia's hand tightened around the edge of the counter. This cannot wait. Then send everything to my office. I will review it after the gala. After the gala may be too late. Ethan paused at the doorway, coat over his arm, face caught between irritation and concern. Olivia, tonight has donors, press, board members, and my father's name on the wall. I need you beside me, steady. Not chasing shadows in spreadsheets during the most visible night of the year. The sentence struck harder because he did not sound cruel. He sounded reasonable. That was always how dismissal dressed itself in expensive rooms. Olivia closed the laptop slowly. Fine, she said. I will be steady. But all day, the warning message stayed under her skin. By 6 that evening, the Grand Meridian Hotel glittered like a palace built to impress people who claimed they were impossible to impress. Crystal chandeliers spilled warm light over white roses and gold table settings. A string quartet played near the marble staircase. Outside, rain crawled down the tall windows in silver lines, but inside, every smile was dry, polished, and prepared. Olivia stood beside Ethan at the entrance to the ballroom, her pale gown soft under the lights, the diamond ring bright on her finger, Ethan's hand resting lightly at her back for the photographers. Beautiful couple, someone called. Flash. Over. Here, Mr. Caldwell. Flash. Olivia, how does it feel to join one of New York's most powerful families? Olivia smiled because that was the job. I am honored to support the Foundation's work. Victoria appeared as if summoned by the word honored, graceful in a deep red gown, her hair swept back, her eyes shining with practiced warmth. Olivia, you look lovely. Almost like you were made for this room. Almost. Olivia heard the blade beneath the silk. Thank you, Victoria. You look very comfortable here. For a fraction of a second, Victoria's smile thinned. Ethan did not notice. He was watching Grant Keller approach with 2 board members, all 3 men wearing the expression of people who had already discussed something without him. Grant greeted Olivia with a polite nod. Miss Bennett, I hope executive materials have been less boring lately. The words were light, but Olivia felt the threat inside them. Ethan looked between them. You two have spoken? Briefly, Olivia said. At the reception. Grant smiled. Your fiancé has a curious mind. Ethan's hand at her back stiffened almost imperceptibly. Olivia sensed the trap before she saw it. The timing was too clean. Victoria near the podium. Grant beside the board. Reporters clustered closer than usual. A technical assistant adjusting the large screen behind the stage. Olivia's stomach dropped. She leaned toward Ethan. I need to show you something now. Olivia, he murmured, still smiling for a donor passing by. Not here. Yes, here. Right now. He turned fully toward her then, and she saw exhaustion cross his face. What is going on? She opened her clutch and took out the small silver USB drive she had prepared that afternoon, loaded with everything she had gathered. Vendor records, public filings, payment patterns, the warning message, and a timeline she hoped would make sense even to a man determined not to see. This is what I tried to tell you. Ethan looked down at it. Before he could take it, the lights in the ballroom dimmed. The quartet stopped. Victoria stepped onto the stage with a microphone, smiling out at the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, before Ethan speaks, the foundation has prepared a short tribute to the Caldwell legacy. Applause moved through the room. Ethan turned toward the stage, confused. Olivia did not clap. The screen behind Victoria glowed blue, then changed. Not to photographs of Ethan's father. Not to images of hospitals and scholarships and smiling children. An email appeared. Then another. Then a bank record. Then a file transfer log with Olivia Bennett's name stamped across the screen. A gasp spread through the ballroom like spilled ink. Olivia stopped breathing. The emails were written in her style, but she had never sent them. The account numbers looked familiar because they came from the vendor list she had been investigating. The file transfer time was impossible, but her temporary access credentials sat beside it in bright, damning text. Someone whispered. She sold the data. A board member stood. Reporters lifted phones. Ethan's face went white with shock. Olivia turned to him immediately. No, Ethan, look at me. This is not real. Victoria lowered the microphone, her performance of horror almost perfect. Ethan, I am so sorry. Security found the leak this afternoon. We were trying to confirm it quietly. Grant stepped forward, voice low and controlled. The evidence links the external transfers to Miss Bennett's access. I advised Victoria not to show it publicly, but the system triggered the presentation file with the tribute deck. Olivia looked at him. That is a lie. Grant's expression did not move. I wish it were. Ethan stared at the screen, then at the USB in Olivia's hand. The thing that should have saved her now looked like exactly what they wanted him to fear. She held it out anyway. Everything you need is here. The real records. The shell companies. Grant's signatures. Please, just open it. Victoria stepped closer. Her voice soft enough for Ethan. Loud enough for the nearest board members. Or that is what she used to take the files. Olivia felt the room tilt. She saw the calculation forming around them, faces choosing the simplest story. Poor girl. Rich fiancé. Access to money. Access to systems. Of course. Ethan's eyes found hers. And for one aching second she saw the man from the elevator, the man who had asked her to try him. Then his fear rose higher than his faith. Is any of this true? He asked. The question broke something in her more completely than an accusation could have. You are asking the wrong person. His jaw tightened. Answer me. Olivia lowered the USB. Rain already streaking the windows behind him. The storm waiting outside like it had known this was coming. I have been trying to save you, she said. And you are standing here deciding whether I am worth believing. No one spoke. Then Ethan looked away. Just once. Just long enough. Victoria saw it. Grant saw it. Olivia saw it most of all. Ethan reached for his phone and said in a voice colder than the marble beneath their feet. Bring the car around. The walk from the ballroom to the hotel entrance felt longer than any hallway Olivia had ever crossed. It was only a few hundred feet of marble, velvet ropes, and gold-framed mirrors, but every step seemed to echo with judgment. Behind her, the gala continued in broken whispers. Reporters murmured into phones. Board members gathered in tight circles. Donors stared as if betrayal were something they could catch by standing too close. Olivia kept her shoulders straight. Her hand closed around the silver USB, the diamond ring burning cold on her finger. Ethan walked beside her but not with her. That was the difference. His body was close, his face controlled, his silence absolute. Two security staff followed at a respectful distance, not touching her, not accusing her. But their presence alone told the story the room had already chosen. At the end of the corridor, rain blurred the glass doors into sheets of silver. Outside, black cars lined the curb beneath the hotel awning, their headlights glowing against the wet street. Olivia stopped just before the doors. Ethan, please. He did not turn. Not here. Then where? In front of your board, you would not listen. In the ballroom, you would not listen. If I wait until tomorrow, Grant will erase whatever is left. Ethan finally faced her. The warm light from the lobby cut across one side of his face, leaving the other in shadow. You keep saying Grant as if repeating his name makes your story true. Because his name is on the approvals. You had access to internal systems. Temporary access you gave me for foundation schedules and donor materials, not finance files. And yet your name is on the transfer logs. Olivia felt the anger rise, sharp and clean, stronger than the humiliation. Because someone used my credentials. That is convenient. She stared at him, almost unable to breathe. Convenient? Do you hear yourself? His jaw tightened. I am trying to protect a company with 30,000 employees. Olivia, I cannot choose emotion over evidence. No, she said softly. You are choosing fear and calling it evidence. The words struck him. She saw it. For 1 second, the Ethan from the elevator looked back at her, the man who had spoken about his mother, the boy who had watched silence destroy a woman he loved. Then the hotel doors opened, and a rush of cold rain swept between them. Victoria appeared behind him, wrapped in a cream coat, her voice gentle enough to sound kind to anyone who did not know better. Ethan, the board is asking whether you want a formal statement tonight or in the morning. I can handle the first draft. Olivia turned slowly. Of course you can. Victoria's eyes moved to the USB in Olivia's hand. Still holding on to that? Ethan looked at it too, and Olivia knew what they had done. They had turned the one thing that could save him into the one thing he feared most. She stepped closer to him, lowering her voice until it trembled not from weakness, but from restraint. Take it. Hate me if you want to. End the engagement if you want to. But take this drive and give it to someone outside your circle. Someone Grant does not control. Someone Victoria cannot charm. Victoria's expression did not change, but her fingers tightened around the strap of her clutch. Ethan saw the movement. For a heartbeat, his eyes flicked toward Victoria. Olivia saw hope move through him, small but alive. Then his phone buzzed. He looked down. A message from Grant flashed across the screen. Emergency board call in 20 minutes. Evidence preservation underway. Recommend restricting Miss Bennett immediately. Ethan's face hardened again. I cannot accept anything from you tonight. Olivia let out a breath that sounded almost like a laugh. You cannot or you will not? He did not answer. He reached for her hand. She thought for one impossible second that he might take the USB. Instead, his fingers touched the ring. Olivia froze. No, she whispered. But Ethan gently slid the diamond from her finger. It should not have hurt. It was a prop, a clause, a public symbol from a private contract. But somewhere between the elevator, the late dinners, the quiet almost smiles, and the way he had once placed his coat around her shoulders without asking for anything back, the ring had become dangerous. It had begun to feel like a door. Now he closed it in front of her. The engagement is over, he said. Olivia looked at the ring resting in his palm, glittering under hotel lights while rain beat against the pavement behind her. Did you ever trust me? Ethan's eyes lifted to hers. His answer came too slowly. I wanted to. She nodded once, as if he had confirmed a number on a balance sheet. That is the cruelest thing you have said tonight. The chauffeur opened the rear door of the Rolls-Royce. Warm amber light spilled across the curb. Ethan stepped toward it, then stopped, his back to her. You should call someone. My driver can arrange another car. Your driver? Olivia repeated. Not you. He turned, but she was already stepping backward out from under the awning. Rain hit her immediately, cold and heavy, soaking the thin fabric of her gown, slipping into her shoes, running down her neck. The doorman moved as if to offer an umbrella, but Olivia shook her head. She would not accept pity from a building that had just watched her be discarded. Ethan stared at her through the rain. For one wild second, she thought he might come after her. Then Victoria said something near his ear. The car door closed. The Rolls-Royce pulled away from the Grand Meridian, its taillights dissolving into Manhattan traffic. Olivia stood on the curb with the silver USB in her hand and no ring on her finger. Across the street, a bus hissed to a stop. A cab splashed through a puddle. Somewhere above her, the hotel. Windows glowed with music, money, and people already rewriting her into a scandal. Her phone vibrated inside her clutch. She almost ignored it. Then it vibrated again and again. Olivia opened the clasp with numb fingers and saw the alert from Caldwell Global's internal security system. Unauthorized transfer scheduled. Amount: $940 million. Execution time: 2 a.m. current time. 12:41 a.m. For several seconds, the rain was the only thing that moved. Ethan had left her. His board had condemned her. His world had humiliated her in a room full of strangers. She owed him nothing. Nothing at all. But then Olivia saw another line beneath the alert. One that made the cold disappear from her skin. Destination account linked to Keller Strategic Holdings. Grant. Her breath steadied. Her grief folded itself into purpose. Olivia looked down the avenue where Ethan's car had vanished, then back at the USB in her hand. You can be wrong about me, she whispered, stepping off the curb into the rain. But I am not going to let them destroy you. Olivia reached Caldwell Tower at 1:06 a.m., soaked to the bone, shivering so hard her teeth nearly clicked, but with her mind sharper than it had been all night. The building rose above Park Avenue like a wall of black glass, its upper floors disappearing into low clouds, the silver Caldwell Global logo glowing through the rain as if nothing inside could ever fall apart. To most people, it looked untouchable. To Olivia, standing at the revolving doors with mud on the hem of her gown and mascara blurred beneath her eyes, it looked frighteningly human. Every empire, no matter how tall, still depended on doors, passwords, tired employees, and one person willing to notice when the numbers stopped telling the truth. The night guard behind the front desk looked up from his monitor and immediately frowned. Miss Bennett. His name tag read Martin. She remembered him from the week Ethan had brought her through the lobby for a foundation meeting. Back then, Martin had smiled at her ring and said congratulations. Tonight, his eyes dropped to her bare finger, then to the water pooling around her shoes. I need access to the executive floor, Olivia said. Now. Martin hesitated. I am sorry, ma'am. There was an alert from corporate security. Your credentials may be restricted. May be is not the same as are. I have instructions to call upstairs before allowing anyone through. Olivia looked at the clock behind him. 1:08 a.m. 52 minutes. Somewhere inside that building, Grant Keller's transfer was waiting like a loaded trap, quiet, clean, and nearly complete. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. Martin, listen to me. At 2 a.m., someone is going to move $940 million out of Caldwell Global through accounts tied to the chief financial officer. If that transfer clears, thousands of people may wake up to layoffs, investigations, frozen accounts, and headlines calling it mismanagement. I know what they said about me tonight. I know what my name probably looks like in your system. But I am asking you to look at me and decide whether I came here in a rain-soaked evening gown at 1 in the morning because I am running away, or because I am trying to stop something. Martin's face changed. Not belief. Not yet. But doubt had opened a small door. Olivia took the silver USB from her clutch and placed it on the desk. Call the outside legal counsel listed on the emergency governance protocol. Not Grant. Not Victoria. Not internal security. Outside counsel. Her name is Miriam Shaw. The number is in the board directory. Martin swallowed, then reached for the phone. Olivia did not wait for permission. She crossed to the security gate, scanned the temporary access card Ethan had given her weeks ago, and held her breath. The small light blinked red. Once, twice, then green. The gate clicked open. Martin looked up sharply. Olivia was already moving. Tell Miriam Shaw to meet me on the 39th floor server room, she called over her shoulder. And do not let anyone erase tonight's security footage. The elevator climbed too slowly. Every floor number glowed like a countdown. 21, 27, 32. Olivia pressed the USB to her chest and closed her eyes, not to pray exactly, but to steady the memory of her father. She saw him at the kitchen table in Queens, sleeves rolled up, glasses low on his nose, saying, "Numbers are not cold, Liv. People use them that way. But numbers can tell the truth when people are too scared to." The doors opened onto the executive floor. Most lights were off, leaving the corridor washed in blue emergency glow from the storm outside. Olivia walked quickly past framed photographs of Ethan's father shaking hands with presidents, governors, hospital directors, factory workers. Legacy. That was the word everyone used around Ethan like it was a crown. But legacy was not marble walls or old speeches. Legacy was what survived the night when no one was clapping. At the server room door, she scanned the card again. Green. Inside, the air was cold enough to make her wet skin ache. Rows of black server cabinets blinked with tiny green and amber lights. A maintenance terminal glowed near the far wall. Olivia sat, pulled the damp fabric of her gown away from the rolling chair, and plugged in the USB. Her fingers trembled over the keyboard, but the pattern in her mind did not. Vendor list, shell accounts, payment batches, approval chain. She found the scheduled transfer in less than 4 minutes, hidden inside a vendor consolidation package labeled routine treasury sweep. The destination account was routed through 3 holding companies, but the final beneficiary matched the public filing she had found the night before. Keller Strategic Holdings. Grant had not even bothered to bury his name deeply. He had counted on speed, confusion, and Olivia being discredited before anyone listened. Arrogant, she whispered. Then the system prompted for authorization to suspend the transfer. Executive credentials required. Olivia's stomach dropped. Her access could see the transaction, but it could not stop it. She checked the time. 1:23 a.m., 37 minutes. Footsteps sounded in the hallway. Olivia froze. The door opened, and for one breath, she thought it was Grant. Instead, a woman in a navy raincoat stepped inside, silver hair pinned neatly at the back of her head, eyes alert behind thin glasses. Olivia Bennett? Miriam Shaw? Martin called. I also received 3 emergency emails from your account with attached records. Miriam moved to the terminal, scanning the screen with frightening speed. Tell me why I should believe you. Olivia pointed to the transfer path, then to the vendor approval chain. Because Grant's supposed evidence against me depends on my credentials being used at 8:14 p.m., while I was on stage in front of 500 people beside Ethan. The transfer log was planted, but the real treasury sweep was scheduled from Grant's executive token at 11:52 p.m. He hid it inside the panic he created. Victoria helped expose me publicly, so no one would trust the person who found it. Miriam's face went still. Can you prove the 8:14 p.m. conflict? Olivia nodded toward the ceiling camera. Hotel footage, guest recordings, photographer timestamps, and Caldwell's own access logs. I put them in the timeline file. Miriam inserted her own security key and began typing. I can freeze the transaction pending board review, but if Grant has secondary authorization, he may try to push it through another route. Then we need the bank. Already calling. At 1:31 a.m., the first suspension request went out. At 1:38, a duplicate payment batch appeared under a different vendor code. Olivia caught it because the amount ended in the same 3 digits as one she had memorized from the gala folder. At 1:44, Miriam connected with the bank's overnight fraud unit. At 1:49, Grant's executive token attempted to override the freeze from outside the building. Olivia's pulse roared in her ears. He knows. Miriam typed faster. Then make the evidence impossible to erase. Olivia copied the logs to the USB, to Miriam's encrypted legal server, to the bank's case file, and to an emergency board archive Grant could not access without triggering notification to every independent director. Her hands were numb. Her wet hair clung to her cheek. Ethan's overcoat, still hanging on a chair in the executive lounge from earlier that week, caught her eye through the glass wall. She had seen him leave it there before the gala. Without thinking, she grabbed it and wrapped it around her shoulders. Not for sentiment, only warmth. But the cedar scent hit her, and for 1 second pain nearly broke. Through the focus, she pushed it down. 1:57 a.m. The final transfer countdown blinked on the screen. 1:58. Miriam's voice sharpened. Bank freeze is pending. I need one more confirmation package. Olivia opened the last file on the USB, the one labeled father pattern because she had named it while angry and tired. It contained the map that connected every shell vendor, every repeated threshold payment, every hidden approval, every false accusation. She sent it. The screen held. The countdown reached 1:59. Then the transaction status changed from scheduled to suspended. A second later, another line appeared. External fraud hold confirmed. Olivia stared at the words, unable to move. Miriam exhaled slowly. You stopped it. The cold room blurred at the edges. Olivia leaned back, Ethan's coat heavy around her shoulders, the silver USB still in her hand. No, she whispered, thinking of her father, of every person who had been blamed because someone richer needed a scapegoat. We caught it. At 2:03 a.m., the server room door opened again. This time, Martin stood there, pale and breathless. Miss Bennett, he said, holding up a tablet. You need to see this. Mr. Keller just entered the building, and he is asking where you are. Grant Keller reached the 39th floor at 2:06 a.m. with his tie loosened, his hair damp from the storm, and the expression of a man who expected fear to open doors for him. Olivia watched him appear on the security feed from the server room, walking fast past the executive portraits, one hand gripping his phone, the other stabbing the elevator button behind him as if the building itself had betrayed him. Martin stood beside the monitor, pale but steady. Miriam Shaw had already called the bank, the outside auditors, and 2 independent board members who were awake now for reasons they would never forget. The transaction was frozen. The evidence was mirrored in 4 places. Grant could still shout, threaten, deny, and perform innocence, but he could no longer erase the truth quietly. Olivia pulled Ethan's overcoat tighter around her shoulders, not because she wanted any piece of him near her, but because the server room was freezing, and her body had finally begun to feel the cold. Her gown was still wet, her feet ached inside ruined heels, her fingers were stiff from typing. Yet when Grant's voice came through the hallway, sharp and controlled, Olivia did not move back. "Open this door." Martin stepped into the corridor. "Mr. Keller, outside counsel is reviewing a security matter. You will need to wait in the conference room." Grant let out a short laugh. "I am the chief financial officer of this company. I do not wait outside my own server room." Miriam opened the door before Martin could answer. Her silver hair was neat, her face calm, her eyes cold enough to stop him mid-step. "Tonight you do." Grant's expression shifted. Just a flicker, too fast for most people. But Olivia saw it, because she had spent years studying the difference between surprise and guilt. "Miriam," he said, smoothing his voice, "I assume Miss Bennett has spun some theatrical story. You do realize she is under internal review for data theft." "Internal review by whom?" Miriam asked. "You." Grant smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "By the company's security protocols." Olivia stepped into view then, still holding the USB. Grant's smile thinned. "You should have gone home. You should have used cleaner shell companies." The hallway went silent. Grant looked at her as if she had slapped him with a spreadsheet. Miriam lifted a tablet. The attempted transfer to Keller Strategic Holdings was suspended at 1:59 a.m. The bank has placed an external fraud hold. The approval chain, vendor maps, hotel timestamps, and credential conflicts have been preserved for board review. Grant's mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since Olivia had met him, he looked less like a powerful executive and more like a man watching a locked door disappear. "This is absurd," he said. "That account is part of a treasury structure." "Then you can explain it to the auditors," Miriam replied, "and to federal investigators if they ask." No one raised a voice. No one touched him. No violence. No spectacle. Only the clean, terrifying sound of truth becoming official. Grant turned away, already dialing. "Ethan needs to hear this from me." Olivia felt the name strike her chest, but she said nothing. Ethan was not here. Ethan had left. Ethan had chosen the ballroom version of her over the real one standing in the rain. Grant walked into the conference room with Miriam following, and within minutes the building began to wake around them. Security officers arrived. Legal staff joined remotely. 2 board members appeared on screen in robes and tired disbelief. The night became a blur of questions and timestamps. Olivia answered each one with the steadiness of someone who knew the cost of not being believed. At 3:12 a.m., she showed the payment threshold pattern. At 3:34, she matched the false leak files to a presentation deck uploaded from Victoria Hayes' assistant's account. At 3:58, she proved her access credentials had been duplicated while she was visible on the gala stage, standing beside Ethan beneath 500 witnesses and a dozen photographers. Every answer placed one more brick back into the wall Grant and Victoria had tried to knock down. By 4:26 a.m., Grant had stopped speaking except through counsel. By 4:52, Victoria's phone records were requested by outside auditors. By 5:17, the independent board chair said the words Olivia had been waiting to hear all night. "Miss Bennett, based on what we have seen, you appear to be the reporting party, not the perpetrator. Reporting party, not fiancé, not scandal, not gold digger, not lucky girl. Reporting party." Olivia closed her eyes for 1 second. In the darkness behind them, she saw her father at the kitchen table and wished he could have heard a sentence like that before the world took too much from him. At 5:47 a.m., the first pale light touched the windows of Caldwell Tower. Manhattan emerged slowly from the storm, wet rooftops shining, avenues rinsed clean, the sky softening from black to blue-gray. Olivia stood near the conference table, one hand braced against the glass, Ethan's coat still around her shoulders. She had not eaten. She had not slept. The adrenaline that had held her upright was draining fast, leaving her hollow and trembling. Miriam approached with a paper cup of coffee. "You saved the company tonight." Olivia looked at the city below. "I saved the evidence. The company can decide what it wants to become." Miriam studied her with quiet respect. "Ethan will be told at the emergency board meeting at 7. Olivia's face tightened. "Tell him whatever the records show. He will want to speak to you." Olivia almost laughed, but there was no humor left in her. He wanted many things. Trust was not one of them. Across town, Ethan Caldwell arrived at the Grand Meridian again just before dawn. Not because he had slept, but because sleep had refused him. He had spent the night in a private board call, listening to Grant's careful reassurances, Victoria's quiet concern, and the storm against his windows. He kept seeing Olivia in the rain, her face when he took the ring, her hand holding out the USB, her voice saying, "You are choosing fear and calling it evidence." At 6:38 a.m., Miriam Shaw's emergency message reached him. He opened the attached preliminary report in the back of his car. The first page showed a frozen transfer for $940 million. The second showed Grant's authorization token. The third showed Olivia's timeline. The fourth showed security footage from Caldwell Tower. Olivia walking through the lobby at 1:06 a.m., soaked, shaking, alone. Ethan stopped breathing. The next clip showed her in the server room, still in the gown he had left her in, typing beneath fluorescent lights, his old overcoat wrapped around her shoulders. He watched her work through the night to save the empire he had accused her of betraying. Then the final audio note played, captured from the server room as Olivia sent the last evidence package before the transfer freeze. Her voice was faint, exhausted, and unbearably clear. "Do not let him lose what his father built." Ethan lowered the phone as the car pulled up to Caldwell Tower. For the first time in his adult life, the building in front of him did not look like power. It looked like judgment. And somewhere inside it, the woman he had abandoned was about to hear the entire board say her name. At 7:04 a.m., Ethan Caldwell walked into the emergency board meeting and understood, before anyone spoke, that power could not protect a man from shame. The conference room at Caldwell Tower was filled with gray morning light, tired faces, untouched coffee, and the hard silence that follows a night when expensive lies stop working. Olivia sat at the far end of the table beside Miriam Shaw, wrapped in a plain company blanket now, her damp gown hidden beneath it, her hair loosely tied back, her face pale from exhaustion. Ethan's overcoat lay folded on the chair beside her like evidence from another life. She did not look at him when he entered. That hurt more than anger would have. Anger still reached toward you. Olivia's silence did not. The board chair, Harold Whitman, rose slowly. Mr. Caldwell, we have reviewed preliminary findings from outside counsel, the bank fraud unit, and internal access logs. The attempted transfer was real. The accusations against Miss Bennett were manufactured. Mr. Keller has been suspended pending full investigation. Miss Hayes has been removed from all foundation and governance duties, pending review of her communications and role in last night's presentation. Ethan heard the words, but his eyes stayed on Olivia. She looked smaller than she had in the ballroom, not weak, never weak, but depleted in a way that made him feel the full weight of what he had done. He had left her in the rain. He had taken the ring. He had made her stand alone beneath the judgment of people who had never earned the right to speak her name. And she had still come here. She had still saved his father's company. Harold continued. Miss Bennett's actions prevented a catastrophic unauthorized transfer and preserved evidence that may protect Caldwell Global from severe regulatory exposure. The board owes her a formal apology. Murmurs of agreement moved around the table. Olivia finally lifted her eyes, not to Ethan, but to Harold. With respect, I do not need an apology whispered behind closed doors. I was accused in front of donors, reporters, employees, and board members. If the truth stays private, the lie wins publicly. Ethan felt the sentence pass through him like a verdict. He stepped forward. She is right. Every face turned. Ethan placed his phone, the engagement ring, and the silver USB on the table. 3 objects. 3 failures. 3 chances to stop being the man who hid behind control. Last night, I allowed fear to make my decision. I saw manufactured evidence and chose the version of the story that protected my pride. I did not protect the truth. I did not protect Olivia. His voice tightened, but he forced himself to continue. Whatever this board decides about my leadership, the first statement from Caldwell Global will name Olivia Bennett as the person who identified the fraud, stopped the transfer, preserved the evidence, and saved this company from a crisis I failed to see. Olivia looked at him then. No softness, no rescue, only a quiet, searching pain. Do not make me part of your redemption story, Ethan. The room went utterly still. Ethan nodded once. You are not. You are the reason I have to earn one. By noon, Caldwell Global released the statement. By 1, every major business outlet that had repeated the scandal began replacing her name with the truth. By 3, video from the gala was followed by security footage from Caldwell Tower. Olivia arriving soaked at 1:06 a.m., Olivia in the server room, Olivia working beside Miriam Shaw, Olivia sending the final evidence package before the transfer freeze. The world that had judged her in seconds now watched the hours she had spent saving it. But Olivia did not wait for the applause. She went to Queens. She returned to the small house with the cracked front steps, the faded blue curtains, and the kitchen where her mother still kept a mug with her father's name on it. She packed quietly, not because the house was lost, but because she no longer wanted to live anywhere that required begging powerful men to believe her. At 6:20 p.m., a black car stopped outside. Olivia saw it through the window and almost did not open the door. When she finally did, Ethan stood on the porch without a driver, without cameras, without flowers. Rain had begun again, softer this time, tapping against the awning above them. He held the silver USB in one hand, his folded overcoat in the other, and the ring in a small velvet box he did not open. I am not here to ask you to come back, he said. Good. Olivia replied. Because I would say no. He accepted that like he deserved it because he did. I am here to return what belongs to you. He handed her the USB. Miriam said the official evidence is archived. This copy is yours. Olivia took it. Their fingers did not touch. Ethan looked past her into the warm little hallway, at the old photographs on the wall, at the house she had fought so hard to save without ever making herself look helpless. Your mother's mortgage has been paid from the compensation owed under our agreement, plus damages approved by the board for public harm. The paperwork is with Miriam. It is not a gift. It is what you were owed. Olivia's expression flickered, but she held steady. And the ring. Ethan looked down at the box. I took it from you when I had no right to take anything else. I wanted to bring it back so you could decide what it means. He opened the box. The diamond caught the porch light, no longer bright with performance, only quiet and waiting. It does not mean a contract now. It does not mean the board. It does not mean my father's will, my company, my image, or my fear. It means I was wrong. It means I am sorry. It means I love you. And I know love is not enough without trust. So I am not asking you to forgive me tonight. I am asking for the chance to become someone who would have believed you in the rain. Olivia's eyes filled, but her voice stayed clear. You humiliated me in front of your world. Yes. You believed people who looked powerful over the woman who was telling you the truth. Yes. You cannot fix that with one speech. I know. The rain softened around them, turning the porch light gold. Olivia looked at the ring, then at Ethan. For the first time, he did not look like a billionaire waiting to be obeyed. He looked like a man standing outside a door he could not buy open. She reached for the velvet box, closed it gently, and placed it back in his hand. Ethan's face fell, but he did not protest. That mattered. Olivia stepped onto the porch beside him, letting the rain touch her sleeve. Keep it until you understand that trust is not something you ask for after the damage. It is something you practice before the storm. Ethan swallowed. May I practice? She looked at him for a long moment, then nodded toward the sidewalk. You can start by walking me to my mother's pharmacy before it closes. She needs her prescription, and I am tired of going through storms alone. Ethan opened his umbrella, then paused and lowered it between them instead of over himself. Olivia noticed. A small breath left her, almost a laugh, almost a beginning. Together, they stepped into the rain, not as a billionaire and his contracted fiancée, not as a scandal and its correction, but as two people learning that love without truth was only performance, and truth, when chosen together, could become a home.